When working with people with challenging needs, I've learned that it's very important to develop some very clear boundaries. And in fact, we all need boundaries in our life. It's very important to have them. And I find that when working with people that have challenges or what we consider youth at risk, having long-term relationships with those people is really valuable. And the only way to do that is to have good boundaries. And so I've learned over my years of experience that there's 3 priorities that it has really helped me stay in contact and stay in good, healthy relationships with youth for years. And the number 1 priority is knowing God. Knowing God, that God is sovereign and that He is in charge, helps us know what our place is in relationship with youth. Being known by God, knowing that we can trust Him, and the fact that He is sovereign is going to help us long term. I've seen often in my work youth that almost have a savior complex, youth workers, and they want to take charge. And often when you're working with somebody who's in crisis or perhaps suicidal, we end up taking that on ourselves. And when we don't have good boundaries and we do end up feeling like we're the savior, we often get into enmeshed relationships and we start to have unhealthy patterns of relating, and we end up burning out. Or often what I've heard is what has happened, I've seen over lots of times, where people end up taking on their crisis themselves. And something that I've learned is called vicarious trauma, where we end up taking on someone else's trauma when we don't have good, healthy boundaries and we don't know where God's place is in our life. Number 2 is knowing yourself, knowing who you are, knowing what your values are, knowing what your stressors are and what motivates you. And are you that chronic fixer? Are you somebody that is constantly in helping relationships and find yourself in too deep? And so knowing who you are, knowing what your values are, is a really good way to start recognizing what your boundaries are. Do you actually know what your boundaries are? Do you have time for recreation in your life? Do you have time for rest? And again, Jesus is a great example for that. He found places to be in solitude and rest. Next priority, number 3, is knowing others. Knowing what your community is around you. One of the things that we have found as a team and with our Young Families program is being able to debrief together as a team regularly. So when we are dealing with some severe crises, we always have a team. We never do that alone. And again, just to note that it's always important to practice good confidentiality rules and making sure that we're protecting the youth that we are working with. But one of the most valuable things is being able to debrief so you're not carrying the load by yourself. Another part of knowing others when setting good boundaries is just having a trusted friend and people that know you really well. When you know that maybe your boundaries are becoming a bit gray, that you can check in with other people and say, hey, am I going too far here? Am I operating out of my own need? And it's great to have people that can hold you accountable and to tell you the truth, that maybe you are in too deep and maybe you need to step back and allow someone else to come in and support you and support this youth that you're working with. So remember, the 3 priorities of working with people with challenging needs is number 1, knowing God. Number 2 is knowing yourself. And number 3 is knowing others. And also remember that crisis isn't necessarily an actual event, it's the person's response to the crisis. So if we can remember that little tip, that can really help us as we're working with people that are in challenging situations. So I hope this information was useful to you as you engage in good, healthy relationships with the youth you're working with.